This video is about censorship in big platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and so on. And we have different intellectuals and journalists talking about whether we should abide by the First Amendment or a consistent basis, or the CEOs can have their own just ways of banning people. So let's give it a watch.
Let me go to you, Steve. Do you have anything to say?
Well, I mean, look, I agree with everything you guys are saying, but I don't know why we have to keep going back to Alex Jones as a reason why he should not be censored. Because I don't want government spying. I don't want government plus corporations spying and censoring political speech. That doesn't mean that a platform can't ever kick anyone off for any reason. And
So, what Jimmy Dore is going to argue about next is that platforms can kick people out, but there has to be a consistent standard. There has to be crisp, clear rules on which speech should be banned and which not. And the other guy is Steve is talking about more like that platforms can decide on their own without much more randomly whether or not someone has to be banned or not. So let's proceed.
and and and
But there has to be a process in place that is transparent. That is not what's happening. Right now, it's happening in secret with warmongering motherfuckers like Henry Kissinger telling.
I agree with you on all of that part. Okay, I mean,
So yes, you can take someone down. You have to have a adversarial judicial process.
I don't know what that means.
So,
Like a courtroom?
Yes, that's what I mean.
No.
Just like Matt Taibbi said, there's been for years. We've had a standard in this country. If someone is using their speech poorly, you go to court. But you're advocating for billionaire guys in Silicon Valley to decide this all on their own, and you run a fucking media company?
Yes, I am.
And that's what you're advocating for?
Yes, I am.
Really?
Yes, I'm advocating that platforms can take down certain creators.
I can't wait till DYT is taken down for being against a war.
The problem
All they have to
is
do is
what
say
I'm
you're
saying.
sowing
That's not what I'm
discord.
saying.
the problem
What are you
is
saying? You're saying that you want Mark Zuckerberg, whatever the fuck Zuckerberg's
Why don't
name
you let me
is.
finish then?
Okay, I'll let you.
Okay, instead of keep constantly interrupting, why don't you let me finish?
Okay,
for a
I'll
second,
let you.
Right. My point is, if you're harassing individuals and making their lives miserable, they can take you down for that.
Who's they? Can I interrupt you?
Yes.
Who's they?
YouTube or Facebook
So
or
some
Spotify
nameless,
or-
unaccountable
Yes.
person.
Yes, they can.
Okay, that is a intellectually lazy position.
No, it's
that
not.
I've debunked a million times
Why-
here already.
So a platform cannot take down anyone for any reason without a hearing in a court of law?
You can throw someone in jail without a hearing. You mean you
Is
have
that-
to have a hearing every time you throw someone in jail? Every time you take someone's freedom of speech away?
I never said jail. Did I say jail?
Did
I say jail?
Okay, so
that's the false equivalency. Okay, that's total fucking bullshit, and you know it. Okay.
So you're saying free speech?
I'm talking.
You're
I'm
saying
not talking about
free
free
speech.
speech. I'm talking about the right to be on a platform. That is not free speech.
So you don't think
that's
that-
not.
so
that
you-
is not.
so
you
you disagree with the idea
No,
of
you
free
were
speech?
saying you were. No, I'm not. See, that's a straw man. Bullshit argument.
That's
That's a
talk
bullshit
about it.
argument.
Let's talk
so
about
why don't you let me finish then?
Okay, I'll let you finish.
You
I'll
keep
let you finish.
interrupting me
All
without
right.
letting me finish. So
I
you
heard
are
a mom
saying
and
that
dad fight.
YouTube can have, you can create a channel on YouTube under the guise of free speech and say whatever you want as long as you're not taken to court, and the YouTube can't do anything about that?
Yes.
No.
To begin with, we have to say that YouTube is not just any platform, it is one of the largest platforms in the world with one of the largest number of people and very, very large influence. I think the reason Jimmy Dore is making an exception about Google, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram is because they can, the owners of them can right away, at their own wish, manipulate democracy and just make the candidate they want to win very easily just by spreading misinformation or selective censoring. That's why I think Jimmy Dore is making an exception about some platforms like this.
Oh, that is not the case.
Yes.
Live in the real world, Jimmy. That
I mean the real world where we have censorship?
Yes, that's the world. That's the world. Yeah, not. We
And
do
I'm
have
fighting
censorship.
against
we
that.
have censorship because we need censorship. We do, not for political speech, but for other kinds of speech. There was this whole group of creators on YouTube in the past. They were called the Reply Girls. Here's what they would do: they would go to one of the best performing YouTube videos, copy their titles and tags, then they put a camera on some girl's boobs and just have nonsense content and trick the algorithm into watching it, they get kicked off.
I think that whatever he said is bullshit because the thing he said can be done against a Republican good video or against a Democratic good video by a Democratic party. And if Twitter or Facebook or YouTube don't have a consistent standard, they can selectively uh, censor one of them and not both of them, depending on which side they want to win. Yes, what he said is in my world a reason for banning, but when they don't have a consistent standard and do it randomly, they can just do it for one side. And that is what Jimmy Dore is against. He's not fighting for the First Amendment on YouTube. He's fighting for a consistent standard. Let's watch the rest of it.
So you're cool with them taking Telesur down?
No,
you're
I'm
cool
not.
with them
I am not. That's not the same thing.
But
that's not the same thing. That's not the same thing. You keep complaining. Look,
So
Jimmy,
you're endorsing that
your
process.
your job as a journalist is to parse out what's right and what's wrong, not throw a giant blanket over everything and create a false equivalency. Telesur being taken down is totally different than Alex Jones being taken down because he is harassing victims of Newtown and directing people to stop them.
Steve.
Okay? That's a totally different thing.
You're advocating for a dark system with no accountability.
No, I am not. No, I am not.
What's the accountability?
I think Jimmy Dore hits the nail on the head here. What's the accountability if Facebook or Twitter just ban someone they don't want to be just because they don't match their political ideology? What's the accountability? There's none.
You just said you just. Am I wrong, or did you just advocate for Mark Zuckerberg being able to do this on his own, or for Google or YouTube to be able to do this with?
They are allowed to have a process.
So you're advocating for in dark.
Yes.
In secret.
Are you saying that Alex Jones never had he had no idea that he's in trouble? How many warnings did he have? How many strikes did he get? And then they took him down.
So I'm talking about Telesur.
I'm not. I agree with you on Telesur. I agree with you. They should not be taken down.
So there should be two different standards, though.
There should be multiple standards. Yes, there should be.
So you're arguing for double standards. You just did it.
No, there's one standard, and if you violate that, then you're out. If you don't violate it, then you're not out. What's so hard to understand? So you're saying
what you mean? Well,
you were
who
saying,
says that you violated it?
Who says? So Alex Jones didn't do anything.
You said no. There should be a.
They have an internal process. Why is the court better than internal process?
Steve asked, why is a code better than an internal process? And Jimmy Dore almost can't believe what he's hearing. So let's listen to the rest of it. But it is ridiculous that he's asking that.
Have an internal process. Why is the court better than internal process?
You're a lawyer and you just said that?
Yes, why?
So why is an open court proceeding with an adversarial process?
Who's the adversary?
Now you're interrupting me. So you're saying that an adversarial judicial process with an impartial judge, which follows the law and the Constitution, is not any better than Mark Zuckerberg and
that is
Henry
totally
Kissinger
separate.
in secret
Totally
deciding this shit?
Totally separate.
So Jimmy Dore, I think, wins the argument here by and large, and the other guy knows he's wrong, so he is just saying totally separate. But I think even he knows within himself he's just wrong here, and he lost the argument.
That's
Totally
what you're
separate.
saying?
It's totally separate.
And you're a lawyer. And you're a fucking lawyer.
I'm a
and
lawyer.
you're the head of a media company
I'm a
on
lawyer.
the internet.
I'm a lawyer.
And so you disagree with Matt Taibbi.
No, I don't.
You are disagreeing with him.
No, I don't.
You are. And you're disagreeing with Chomsky.
I'm not.
And you're disagreeing with me.
No,
and
this
you're
is what you always do, Jimmy. You throw a giant blanket.
Dude,
I disagree with
I'm fucking telling you exactly what you're telling me.
I disagree with
There's
on the
no
Alex
defending
Jones
what
part.
you're defending.
No,
You're defending a
I'm not.
opaque,
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. You're putting words in my mouth, and you're doing
not defending that?
I'm not. No, I'm not.
So you
We're done. We're done. Go to break or whatever.
Okay, the next clip is more about explicit examples of conservatives being held to a different standard than liberals, and conservatives being banned much more often than liberals for the same sort of things, or even for less sort of gross speech or gross material on online media. And the reason Noam Chomsky or people like that stand for this is is basically a principle. They just stand by the First Amendment and think that that should be the biggest determinant of whether someone stays on a big platform like Google, Facebook, YouTube, or at least there should be a consistent standard and a courtroom to determine whether someone stays on it or not, and that it shouldn't be just given randomly to one person like Jack Dorsey or Mark Zuckerberg, because there's too much bearing on that.
And I believe that to be the case.
So your platform restricts speech.
Our platform promotes speech unless people violate our rules
And in a specific direction.
in any direction.
But Uncle, I don't want to say his name, the guy who calls for death gets a suspension. The guy who insinuates death gets a permanent ban.
But Tim, you're misinterpreting what I'm saying, and I feel like you're doing it deliberately. It's not about one particular thing. It's about a pattern and practice of violating our
And you
rules.
have a pattern and practice of banning only one faction of people.
I don't agree with that.
Recently published an article where they looked at 22 high-profile bannings from 2015 and found 21 of them were only on one side of the cultural debate.
And here's the first explicit example that they have banned 21 conservatives on Twitter and just one liberal from 2015. So that's the first explicit description of a bias here.
I don't look at the political spectrum of people when I'm looking at their tweets.
Right, you have a bias.
I don't know who they are.
You're biased and you're targeting specific individuals because your rules support this perspective.
No. I don't agree with that.
Well,
and I
so
don't
Can
think
you be
that's the
clear though
case.
in like what rules support that perspective?
Specifically, the easiest one is misgendering, right? Because that's so clearly ideological. If you ask a conservative, what is misgendering? They'll say if someone is biologically male and you call them, she, biologically male and you call them a she, that's misgendering. That's a conservative view. The progressive view is inverted. So now you actually have in your policies a rule against the conservative perspective.
Just one example here. You can see the whole video of Tim Pool, Jack Dorsey, and this woman on Joe Rogan to see the entire video of them censoring conservatives, and they weren't defending themselves well. Tim Pool, I think, won the conversation. And I'll give you one more example of when Sam Harris asks why not have a very clear and consistent standard like the First Amendment as a standard for Twitter, what Jack Dorsey says.
Politically in the center, who are quite worried about how your response to the extremes of our politics is making conversation very difficult. And there's a pervasive sense that the response is biased politically, so that, for instance, people get suspended. I mean, recently someone got suspended. It was ironically a feminist journalist in Canada who, I think her name is Megan Murphy, who is just not, she's a feminist, but she's not sufficiently woke apparently on the transgender topic. And she wrote a tweet which I believe read, "Men are not women," and got suspended over that tweet. But at the same moment, we have people like Louis Farrakhan, who can tweet about Jews or a satanic influence or something expressing that sentiment, who's in good standing. There are even terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah who have valid Twitter accounts, and yet Milo Yiannopoulos is knocked off for whatever he said. Now, I completely understand why, if you viewed yourself as a media company on some level, I could understand why you would want the freedom to amplify certain voices or not. I mean, there are people who get banned from Twitter who I wouldn't want to have on my podcast. I mean, I've chosen not to interview Milo, for instance, right? Because I think he's a fundamentally insincere person. He's not interesting to me as someone to talk to. But Twitter strikes most people as a very different kind of platform. It's essentially internet infrastructure at this point. And I'm sure there are examples of people on the left being banned for their violating your terms of service, but there is a pervasive sense that this tends to run one way, and that where you have people on the right or who touch some taboo that has encroached on our conversation on specific issues, whether it's gender or race or any religion, any of these hot button issues, and the response from the top at Twitter reliably lands on one side of the political divide.
Explicit description of how biased they are. Conservatives were banned for just tweeting "learn to code," and then when President Trump got elected, Antifa actually made a blueprint to assassinate him, and that was just on. That wasn't even removed, and that is what Sam Harris talks about. That there is a pervasive sense that censorship only goes towards the right wing, and even centrists feel that, and they are worried about the conversation that goes on there. And Jack Dorsey, in the next clip, you will see that Jack Dorsey says that they can't be neutral, which I think he means by that he can't go by the First Amendment, and then he says that he wants a stance of impartiality. So clear rules, which when you break will get you off Twitter. Otherwise, you will just stay there. And he just states explicitly that he can't go by the First Amendment, even when Sam Harris asks him why not, because that is the gold standard for free speech. Let's listen to it.
So there's a lot there. I don't believe that we can afford to take a neutral stance anymore. I don't believe that we should optimize for neutrality. I do believe that we should optimize for impartiality, and I do think there is a difference there. To me, neutrality is a lot more passive, a lot more hands off. And what we have seen.
Let's just pause there for a second, because it seems to me that in thinking about how difficult this is, if you're trying to enforce some curation process, it's just very hard to see how you can ever get it right. So my question is, why not simply take refuge in something like the First Amendment and draw a very bright line around violence or the threat of violence, or in any way trying to engineer violence with speech, and everything else is okay to say. It would be passive, but it would also be a comprehensive response that has at least in the U.S. case, a backing of the First Amendment.
Jack Dorsey lies saying that he wants his spirit of censoring is in light with the First Amendment. That is completely wrong. The way Twitter censors conservatives is much more different, and he says that there has to be a repetition, which is again wrong. There have been many cases where some person has just written pink is for girls just one time and they have been censored. So he lies a lot here.
So the enforcement of them is not always apparent. And the reason why is because a lot of what we're looking at right now is behaviors in the background. So if you just look at one enforcement action, we don't suspend people purely for saying one particular thing permanently. If there was a violent threat that was specific around a location, we absolutely would. But we want to make sure that, so usually there is a lead up to this, or there are other actions happening. They might be controlling multiple accounts and using all those accounts to harass the same people or try to shut them down, which will end up in a permanent suspension. So it's not just the speech that they're saying on the surface, but also the actions that they're taking in the background. And where we haven't been great is explaining that. We don't have an equivalent right now to kind of a case law system where we can actually show what's happening for each one of these cases. We'd like to change that. We would like to be a lot more transparent around the actions that we take in the enforcement. But ultimately, I don't think we can just be this neutral, passive platform anymore because of the threats of violence, because of doxing, because of troll armies intending to silence someone, especially more marginalized members of society.
Is a very good excuse to not be responsible and just blatantly censor anyone that they deem fit. And Tim Pool has talked about this again, where he shows that they seem interested, but they actually are not interested in changing these things, and they are very explicitly biased against conservatives, and their laws are set in that manner. They don't have a consistent standard either, and these things might because these things there are so many people on these platforms, and their influence is so high. There have been calls where these platforms have more than 50 million people. So platforms after a certain number of people should abide by the American Constitution or something, or the constitution that the creator has in their respective country, that they have to abide by, so that these people on their own cannot choose elections. I'll leave the link to the videos I have taken it from, the complete videos, in the description. Please subscribe if you like this video. It took some time to make. This is my opinion on big platforms censoring people. And remember, if they're censoring conservatives, one day they might censor liberals, and they might come for you if you don't want to stand for a principle right now.